Morning. This is Jim Whining and an ordinary man talking about character today. Character. We hear that phrase so often, and do we really understand what it means? Let me just start right off with an example of character and how we'll build to that answer. A few years back, I was driving on I-70 in Kansas City, heading from, I think it was Blue Springs to Kansas City. It was raining hard. You know what I'm saying about hard rain? You couldn't hardly see anything. Raining so hard, and it was in the early morning, but there was some light, and the traffic was very close and moving slow, but close, and then speeding up, and then moving slow, and then all of a sudden, I noticed um, to the right of me, on the side of the road, I saw ahead a lady. She was standing outside and had a flat tire on her car. For years, I I observed my father and my grandfather. And whenever they saw somebody on the side of the road, they would always stop and offer help. And I thought to myself, yep, I need to do that. And so I pulled over on the side of the road and I put a hat on. I think I had a coat on, and my son was over in my older son was in the side of the car there in the front seat. And I got out. And the rain was pouring on me every which way but loose. And I walked toward the lady, and as she was looking down at her tire, and then trying to figure out what to do. And then I was about maybe 15, 20 feet from her, and I said, "May I help you, ma'am?" And she turned to me and gave me the finger and said, "Get the H out of here." And I said, "Okay." And I turned and I walked back to my car, and my son and I drove away. And he asked me, he said, "Dad, why didn't you want you to help her with the flat tire?" And I said, "She didn't trust me. She did not trust me." Well, I'm a 6'3" guy, and probably in that day and age I was around 250, and she didn't know. And so I said, "No, she didn't trust me." See, it takes time to build character. And that character is so fragile that you're carrying around on your shoulder. That piece of your life that examples who you are is so fragile. You know, I'll give you another example that's happened to my wife and I this past, I guess, 2 weeks. For years, and I think everybody probably watching this program relies on the United States postal system. I mean, we mail letters. We still mail letters, probably not so much as before. And of course, a lot of the mailing now is circumvented by direct deposits and things like that through the internet system. But I was in the process of sending, and we did some closing statement papers and cashier's checks and a personal check and all this a significant amount down to Texas from Missouri. And I sent that material, and it over the span of 5 or 6 or 7 days, and it was what they call priority express mail, supposed to be the U.S. Postal System's best mail. It got lost. It never made it to the destination, and the guarantee turned out to be of no value. And so immediately that trust that I had and respect I also had for the United States postal system was in challenge because they had failed on their promise. Now think about that. If you were me, you'd relied on the postal system, you had followed their rules and guidelines, and they had failed to deliver. Well, that begins to crack that trust, doesn't it? That long term requirement to get to character that the US postal system had was cracked by that. Then the second problem, which I hope no one runs into, I called their consumer affairs department. I called their McAllen office, their Lee Summit office, their Kansas City office. I called everyone imaginable to find out the status of my package. And I ran into two or three things that I cannot believe that I'm going to say to you. They never returned my phone calls. They never returned my emails. And in fact, eventually they were blocking my phone calls. They would just let the phone ring off. Two times they returned my call. They did not return it. They called by themselves. They just called, and one of them advised me that they couldn't find the package. And the other call was the person that said, well, I don't think it's here, even though it said the mail, according to the tracking number, was in McAllen, Texas. Otherwise, the calls, the emails, the constant communications that I was extending to their consumer affairs department and everything else, zero response. The second break in character came from that. And the third and final was when they would refer to this as a problem that maybe I possibly instigated by my handwriting or something else. And quite frankly, they took the package away from me in Lee Summit and took my envelope, stuck it in their envelope, their Priority Express mail, and they wrote it on it. I never touched it, the writing on the envelope. So over the years, the United States Postal System had respected my requests. I trusted their delivery, and I had a great affection and appreciation for them. And in one instance, all that time of building the character of that public office was destroyed in just one incident. And that to me is a very alarming thing that we have to look at. And that is not only the character of us, but how we perform our work in the world, how we do our jobs. Because character involves three things. It involves, first, you must understand the situation that's being confronted by a person. Second, you have to be concerned enough to offer viable solutions that will help that person. And then you have to really, if you have character, you've got to give more than you'll ever receive. You've got to be able to give more than you ever receive. You see those three steps? When you talk about understand, that means you respect a person. When you talk about solutions, that means you trust that person because they're working for you. And third, you give solutions, you give your time and your respect, and without the idea of receiving anything in return. Anything in return. I think about people who do that every day. I don't know. I hope this show causes you to think about our firefighters, our policemen, our soldiers, our public servants, people who, in their job and responsibility, they have to literally have character, because character is what makes this country great. I didn't vote for Trump 2 out of the 3 years for 2 out of the 3 times he ran, but I did vote for him once. And I say this, that's really irrelevant. What's relevant is I trust and respect and love the fact that we have a president that we elect in a democratic society. And anybody who wants to glorify themselves by shooting at the president or trying to kill the president is trying to kill our country, regardless of whether you're a Democrat or Republican or an independent or a socialist. You kill the president, you are trying to kill this country. And this is a great country to live in because look, I can talk about the United States postal system very comfortably and not worry about being harmed by our government. I'll leave you with this thought because every one of us has this responsibility. When I was a child, about 10 years old, my aunt and uncle, my Aunt Pat, my Uncle Ellis, they moved away from Wichita, moved to St. Louis. She had a very responsible job with the government, and I think so did my uncle. And they left Wichita, but she said to me, I will call you every day and we'll have a word in the dictionary that we'll learn to spell. You'll learn to spell, and we'll talk about what that word means. And you know what she did? She did that. And she would call me up. We had a landline phone, and I would be at home like at 4:30 or 5. Probably dad was at work, and I think probably mom was at a church event. And she would call me she didn't call me, I don't think she called me on the weekends, but every day, Monday through Friday, she'd call me about 4:30, something like that. And we'd have a word. She'd pull the word out of the dictionary and I'd learn how to spell the word. And then she said, now I want you to use that word every day, and try to fit it into conversations so that you get comfortable with that word. She did that for me for I don't know how many years, probably until I went away to college. She had character. She had character. She knew where I was. She respected who I was as a young man. And she developed trust with me. I trusted her so much because of that. And that's love. Character builds love. Why do we rely on Jesus Christ? Because he had character, because he loved us. He skipped over respect and trust and did it in such a way that we sometimes have lost that way, but we know the answer. Thank you for listening today. Work on your character. It's hard to care for another person more than yourself at a time when they're in a difficult situation or just living their normal life. This has been Jim Wanting, an ordinary man, talking about character. God bless you and have a good day.